Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Jurgen Liias. I am a Roman Catholic priest and a resident here in the Melrose community and serve on the staff of a neighboring Catholic church, St. Patrick's in Stoneham. I'm also the founder and host of this show, Wellsprings of Faith, which has been going on for 20-something years here in Melrose. And it's a show that looks at a person's journey in faith and also the fruit of that faith in their life and in the life of the world. Today we welcome back a guest who's been with us before, but quite a number of years ago, I can't remember how many, and a dear friend from the North Shore when I served in the parish there, Wendy Murray. She is a author. She used to work for Christianity Today, which is one of the premier evangelical Christian magazines, but as author of many wonderful books. In particular, we're going to be looking at her most recent work, which is a work on Saint Clare, Saint Francis's companion and the founder of a religious order in the Catholic Church called the Poor Clares. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's funny, right before we got together, my previous guest I discovered they're having a Poor Clare coming to their church to do I don't think I've ever met a Poor Clare. So I'm going to hear her later this week, actually.
Oh, good.
She has a wonderful gift, the ministry of healing.
Tell her about my book.
Yeah, I will. I will bring it along and show it to her. Anyway, Wendy, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, it's been a long time since you were on here, and I have to confess, I'm not sure I remember fully your story and faith. And that's always been one of the first things I like to do is ask a person a little bit. So if you could maybe, in abbreviated fashion, talk a little bit about your journey and faith in Christ, and then we can sort of move into particularly some of your recent work as a writer.
Okay. Well, I've been an active and devoted Christian for most of my life. My family of origin was not a Christian home. There was church that we would attend now and then on holidays, that kind of.
Where'd you grow up?
In Chagrin Falls, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
I'm a Midwest Ohio girl.
Okay.
But you probably recall back in the early 70s, there was this very effervescent and powerful Jesus movement.
The Jesus movement, yes.
And I was part of that.
Ah.
I was kind of spontaneously converted as a teenager. I didn't have anyone praying with me. No one was leading me in a prayer of, accepting.
What happened?
Well, I had been injured. I had been an athlete and had a pretty serious knee injury. I had a trick knee, so I was constantly contending with this.
Yeah.
This was like a bone of contention in my young life. But I injured it pretty significantly, and really it caused me to lose my whole trajectory as an athlete. And I had been pretty active in sports, which, that's for teenagers.
Yeah,
that's your
a big
whole world.
thing.
But at the same time, kind of juxtaposed with that, my father at that time in my life was an alcoholic.
Oh.
And it had cast a very dark shadow over my life, over our family life. It was a very sad period of time for us. So anyway, the combination of those two elements created almost, I have to guess, I would call it a emotional crisis of sorts. And in the midst of a weak moment when I felt truly lost and sad, I felt the movement of the Spirit come over me. I was alone. I was in my bedroom. I had a cast from my hip to my toe.
Wow.
And I knew without question that it was the Spirit of Jesus. I knew Jesus had come into my life in an inexplicable
Without
way.
invitation.
Right, unsolicited.
Except, maybe an unconscious
I wasn't
invitation.
asking for it, and there it was. So that was the beginning.
Oh. It's wonderful. I mentioned to you before the show, this is something like close to a 500 show. And of course, it's especially about conversion and faith journey. And there are many ways. Everybody's got a different story. But I must confess, some of the most profound stories are like yours. It wasn't, asking God into your life. It was not just reading and coming to conviction. It was true, or even someone telling you, giving you the 4 spiritual laws, and you trying the sinner's prayer. It's these sort of autonomous acts of God that breaking into a person's life. Sort of like St. Paul.
A little bit, maybe not quite as dramatic.
No, but still.
I'm compelled to add to that, though. That was in February.
Yeah.
In April, early April, my father was miraculously delivered from alcoholism.
Wow.
And he had been trying for, years to
Yeah.
quit. And he even had kind of a breakdown of sorts that caused him to have to be hospitalized. It was a very tumultuous journey for him, for all of us.
Wow.
But within 6 weeks of my spontaneous conversion, there was a very life-changing miracle
Yeah.
that took place in my life, in my family's life, in my father's life.
Wow.
So
How wonderful.
that to me was the imprimatur.
Yeah, yeah.
I know, I felt like the Lord was saying, I know this happened to you alone. You don't know how to explain it to people, but this is real, and this is my amen to what occurred in your life 6 weeks prior.
Yeah.
So my dad's deliverance from alcoholism is, an integral part to my conversion story.
Praise God for that.
Yeah.
And so, again, because I want to get to your work, so what are some of the other trajectories, both up and down, as there is in the Christian life?
Yeah.
Somebody said the Christian life is 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards, but you get there anyway because you're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
So anyway, as a result of my conversion, I was zealous and enthusiastic. Went to college with the hope of. I majored in religion, took Greek and Hebrew both in college.
Good for you.
I didn't even wait for grad
for
school for
seminary or
that,
something,
and that's where I met the man who became my husband. And after our college years, we both came east and attended Gordon Conwell, and then went into ministry together. But I was constantly feeling pulled toward writing. I had always been able to write because, that's kind of how I got through all my courses in seminary. I could take complex concepts and distill them and articulate them. So I actually left the trajectory of ministry and pursued writing. I went to a local newspaper and asked if I could start doing some stories for them. And that, in fact, did happen. And that was just the beginning of what ended up to be a career for me.
Yes.
In the meantime, my husband was a pastor, and we were in a couple different churches over the span of our marriage. And I can't get away from the fact that probably the most traumatic part of my whole spiritual and life journey was the fact that my marriage ended after 24 years. And in a significant way, that's how I found the saints. Prior to then, I was just doing the kind of devotion and Christian exercises that are typical of the evangelical faith expression.
Yes.
Bible studies and church and mission committees and, morning devotions and all those accoutrements that very much kind of define the evangelical sensibility. So what happened for me, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
No.
If there's more you want.
No, only to say, even though I'm a Roman Catholic priest now, obviously for much of my own life, I was immersed in the evangelical world and all the riches and goodness of that. But also, I was thinking a little bit of a kind of, I don't know if triumphalism is the right word, but a certain kind of sense. Well, if you just do this. Right. And usually, something like going through a divorce just throws.
Right.
There's not enough kind of room in the system to deal with.
Yeah, the grid only has so much flexibility. Well, that's part of what caused a breakdown for me in my own faith journey. I really thought that, my marriage was troubled, but all marriages are troubled.
Right.
So I carried on, and it reached a point where I felt it was almost not obedient to continue in the way that we had been living. I won't go into the details, but it was years. I mean, we had been married for 24 years, so ultimately it reached a point of collapse. And what I thought would happen, and it was over a few years, I thought the church would help. My ex-husband was a pastor, so I turned to his church for help. And this was a critical point that really, I think, caused the bottom to fall out. When it came to helping me, I mean, honestly, reckoning with the kind of help we needed in our marriage, the church opted out. In fact, I spoke to the chairman of the governing body, which in that church was a deacon board, not an elder board, and he never, after I called him in a very painful moment, he was kind on the phone, but I never heard from him again after that, and there was nothing more done. No one spoke to me, no one even looked at me. So it was clear to me that the church had made their choice, that they weren't going to entertain this messy problem, they were going to protect the pastor. And that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah. Well, of course, being Catholic now, even though I wasn't part of it because I wasn't a Catholic then, but obviously you might say it's the same kind of systemic inability of the institution to respond to sin.
Right.
And particularly, the sin of its leadership.
Yeah. Well, and, the evangelical tradition is very strong on doing everything biblically.
Yes.
And I just couldn't see any of that coming into play at all. Here I am, I need help. I'm trying to do it the way the Bible told. Anyway, all that
But they didn't follow the Bible.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah, there are, Lord.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's not well, in some ways it is a psychology book and a systems book, the Bible, but it's not, it's not a manual of the way we might have an institution of procedures. But there's enough in there that guides us.
Right.
But yeah.
Of course. I mean, there's guidance about how to reckon
deal
with
conflict,
sin. And anyway, all that to say, I was like, my eyes were open, my life was shattered, and I became cynical and dark. It's like, this is all, I don't even know what this is meant to be. I mean, I lost complete confidence, complete collapse of the confidence of my own faith tradition. I will say, I'm compelled to add, I never lost my faith in God, nor my devotion to Christ. That never left.
That didn't leave.
No. But in terms of the tradition that I had tethered myself to, I was at sea. I was lost.
Over the years, one of the great gifts God gave me is my work as working with young seminarians and all that. And I don't know how many times I said to them, you've got to keep your eyes on the Lord, because if you have your eyes on the church, you will grow to hate the church, and you will grow to hate your people, and because they're going to hurt you. They're going to, and as I was speaking more for pastors, but all there is, you just have to keep your eyes on the Lord. Thank God you were able to do that.
Well, and that's where my...
Some people don't. They lose their faith.
I know. Some
completely.
People become very dark and bitter.
And
yeah, I definitely did think, by God's grace.
I remember one of the first books you gave me, and it was very moving. That was On Broken Legs, was the title of it?
Right.
Which you share some of that spiritual travail, you might say. And it's very moving, and I'm sure it's helped a lot of people. So
people need help.
As our suffering, often, if we give it to the Lord, becomes a vehicle, a gift to other people.
Well, and that book, Unbroken Legs, was the kind of the foothold into my journey my subsequent journey that has kind of overtaken my life in these past, I guess it's been, 10, 20, maybe even almost 20 years, the journey with the saints, because that book recounts the year following my divorce and how my whole world collapsed. And at the very end of the first year after that, after the end of the marriage, my sister and I went to Italy, just kind of as a rehabilitation type thing for me, a walking tour in Umbria. And part of that tour, we went all over these lovely little Italian medieval towns and, vineyards and olive groves and all of this. But the tour climaxed in the town of Assisi. And I had always known who St. Francis was. You can't study religion over the many years that I studied it and not know. Plus, Franco Zeffirelli did the great movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon that made him almost like a cult figure, a religious hippie, so to speak. So I had a general idea, but something really turned my head when we were in Assisi. Something woke up that had fallen down. And I became almost, it ignited my curiosity, which I think was St. Francis's way of bringing me back to a place of hope and belief. In Assisi, there's a real palpable sense of the presence of St. Francis. As he was dying, he died young in his 40s, he's blind, so many other things were wrong with him. He was in terrible pain. They called the final weeks of his life his agony. But they were bringing him down from the city down into the valley where he rebuilt a few churches, and the one that he kind of considered his home was in the valley.
Yeah,
and they were carrying him on a bed down back to the valley to die. That's where he wanted to die. But he asked them before they made it to their destination to stop and let him turn around and face the town. And even though he was blind and infirm and could barely function, he raised his hands and prayed a perpetual blessing over Assisi. Wow. And I'm a big believer that blessing is felt. People come to Assisi not even looking for it. A lot are looking, but some aren't.
No, right.
And they find blessing and miracles that, it's kind of astonishing.
Yeah.
So that opened my curiosity about St. Francis, and being a writer, I eventually went back to Assisi and lived on my own for a few months just to kind of get to know the town and the libraries. Was able to cobble together a book proposal, which in turn enabled me to get a book contract. So when I got this contract, then I moved lock, stock, and barrel to Assisi to write the book.
So how long were you there?
I was there about a year and a
Wow,
half.
so it was really a significant time, yeah.
In the landscape of a life, it's not that long, but it was a good,
real
solid.
Immersion in
I got into the libraries, got to know all the friars.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that comes too. Of course, I'm going to talk a little while about your most recent book.
Yeah.
On Claire, but I remember reading your book on Francis as well, and actually, I was intrigued by that sense of living there and getting to know these people. It wasn't just research from a distance.
No.
But and like you said, the kind of, I'm much more aware of that now, being a Catholic, than I ever was as a Protestant. The objective reality of the saints and communion with them, and spiritually, but also in places. And, I took St. John Vianney. You probably have heard of him. He's the patron saint of parish priests. He was quite a character. That book, that'll be a lot of fun for his book. But someone gave me a relic of his, and he was an extraordinary confessor. His confession line would be miles. People would be coming. And I always take his relic into the confessional with me. And I just feel like he's with me and helping me be a good confessor myself. Anyway, it's not about me. So that was a kind of, like you said, a whole new, not only just a new dimension of your Christian life, but a healing for you and your own spirit.
I found the consolation of the saints. And that's something that is very much missing in the Protestant tradition, in the evangelical tradition. And I'm a very strong believer that we ought to know these people and honor them and appreciate who they are and benefit from their friendship. I mean, we are told in the book of Hebrews that we're surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, and they're there. They're with us. They're helping us. They're part of a world we can't see, but yet a world we're very intimately connected to.
No, and I even though I kind of, as an Anglican, we had some sort of commitment to that, and we're not quite as adamantly terrified of the saints as
Right.
and any talking to them that the most Protestants, but it was still not the full-bodied sense of
and
the
it- you
communion
know,
that the Catholic Church has.
When I lived in Italy, I could see where, a lot of the devotion to the saints was very commercialized.
Superstition.
Some kind,
yeah.
exaggerated and all of that. I could see that. I wasn't enamored of that.
Yeah.
But I was there to find the man of Francis. I wanted to know who he was, apart from all of the other interesting, addenda.
Well,
that
Francis in particular, I mean, was, as I said, the most loved and least followed saint.
Yeah, that's very true.
Everyone loves Saint Francis,
Yeah.
but no one follows
If
his.
they really knew what
Yeah,
it meant to be a
yeah.
Franciscan.
So anyway, there's a
Yeah.
lot, but I want to get
Yeah.
to your most recent book, and this wonderful, of course, the other half of
Yeah.
the Franciscan movement, because it really was a partnership.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot more about that partnership from this wonderful book. The book is Claire of Assisi by Wendy, Gentle Warrior. I just highly recommend it. It's obviously filled with a lot of history, which was fascinating, and just the knowledge of the times and the kind of interesting romance, you might say, between the kind of chaste romance between Claire and Francis, and the politics of the church and the empire, the political, the secular powers as well as the church powers. All that was fascinating. But there are a couple of things. Well, to say a little bit about your journey into Claire before I ask you a couple of questions that
Okay.
strike me from the book.
Well, it was inevitable.
Yeah,
If I'm writing about St. Francis, Claire's ever there.
yeah,
And I initially thought I would just follow up on that book with a book on Claire, but she was elusive to me early on. There
Yeah.
was a lot about her I did not understand, particularly the way her life developed, and it's more of an interior life because she
Right.
lost her physical mobility just about when Francis died. So she cultivated a very interesting interior life. All that to say, I read her writings and things, but I didn't explore it. It felt elusive to me. So I kind of put that off, that is, trying to write about Claire. Waited. Now and then I'd cobble together a thought of a proposal, what I would put in the way of chapters, but it really took a long time, and it almost felt as if I had to wait for Claire to come to me.
ah,
And she did. There was a day, it was like, okay, you're ready. I think, I'm not even sure if I put it in the book. I might have put it in my proposal, but she came to me like a cloud. It's
no, I
like-
don't remember. You might have said that, but I don't remember
Yeah.
that in
And
the book. Yeah.
interestingly, when I felt that readiness, I was about the age Claire was when
Oh.
she died. So I wasn't ready
Oh, interesting.
all those years earlier.
Ah.
And, it's funny, you don't mess with the saints. If you're going to write about them, it's got to be the real thing. It
Yeah.
can't be some kitschy, little. So Claire came to me in a way that I understood. And so I was able, thankfully, I got a contract to write about her. And the story of Claire is an extremely interesting one on two levels. First, she loved Francis and she followed him. She left her home, a key family of nobility in
Yes.
Assisi. She was being groomed, for a marriage of rank. She was the town beauty.
Yeah, I mean, Francis was sort of middle class,
Yeah,
merchant
right.
class.
He was
but this
middle-
was
but
royalty.
she was the
Yeah,
top.
Yeah, right.
And she had a big role to play in the future establishment of her family. And as I outlined in both this book and my book on St. Francis, I believe that the two of them met and fell in love.
Mm.
And there's no way they could really go down that road. And Claire had always been a very spiritual person, and I believe she was instrumental in Francis' conversion.
Mm.
That's my own
Yeah.
take on it, and I have reasons for it. You'll have to read the books to discover them. But anyway, the two of them configured a way that they could live out their days
Yeah.
together, not, intimately together,
Right.
but sharing the same ground to stand upon, sharing the same future, sharing the same religious vision. And that was to renounce their rank in their family and take on the tunic of a penitent. So they did that.
Yeah.
And of course, Francis having gotten, Francis being Francis, he just drew people to him. So he had to contend with the fact he was getting a following. So he had to establish some legitimacy to what was going on with him. It came to pass, he was able to secure a rule which meant he could be formed as an order with the blessing of the Pope. And Clare, following him, fit into that scheme as the founding female member of Francis Order, which is the second order of the Franciscans, now known as the Poor Clares.
Right.
So that's, it was inevitable. I would have to come into her world. What ended up happening for Clare, she had to keep making concessions. She wanted to go with Francis all over, and she couldn't. That obviously was never going to happen. She was getting ill, losing some strength, and ultimately Francis asked her to please just stay here at the convent, a place called San Damiano,
Yes,
just outside
right.
of Assisi,
I've been there.
and please be the one in charge of the other women who now were wanting to come and follow
Right.
her. She didn't want that at all. She wanted to be out and about, but she obeyed Francis. She did it, kind of with her teeth gritted.
Right,
But,
right.
but then Francis died. And there she was. She herself was sick. She had lost her mobility, and she was inside this convent. Now what?
Yeah.
And the forces of politics and the movement of the order itself were all trying to reconfigure what it meant to be a Franciscan. It was departing from Francis' very spare and stark vision for poverty and obedience. Clare refused to give any ground on that, and she spent the last decades of her life fighting that battle
Yeah.
to preserve the
Yeah.
clear, unfiltered version of what Francis wanted. So that was her battle, and through that she cultivated this very interesting spiritual life, the bridal mysticism that you mentioned.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't believe we're out of time.
We're out of
I could
time?
do.
I'm
I
so
could
sorry.
do. I know. No. We'll have to have you
I'm
continue this
sorry.
conversation
Yeah.
another time. But I was deeply struck by that image of bridal mysticism. This deep. It's one of the images of our Lord as the bridegroom,
Yeah.
and of course, and the union there, and then also, the poverty and the deep thing. Maybe we can talk about that another time.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
I feel like I didn't cut to the chase enough.
No. This probably deserved an hour rather than a
Well.
half hour, but that's the format we
Yeah.
limited to.
Okay.
But look, let me just say that I have to say I can't more highly recommend this wonderful book, not only as a piece of history, a piece of spirituality, an entrancing sort of journey to get to know this extraordinary saint, woman saint, but also your writing is weaved through with just a lot of deep spiritual insights for any Christian in their own spiritual life. And so we'll have to have you back to talk about even more what you learned about from Clare and do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for, again, Clare of Assisi by Wendy Murray. And these days you can always find books on Amazon and everywhere else, so that's good. And thank you for being with us for our program, Wellsprings of Faith, and this conversation. Please do join us again, and may God bless you.